Hello, viewers, and welcome to another episode of Choosing the Red Pill with Rajesh and Omer. Today, we are going to discuss one of the pertinent issues of our time. Especially during this corona pandemic, technology is being used by most of the countries to enable contact tracing and or to alert users of the proximity with any corona positive patient. So, which has once again raised the privacy concerns of the citizens and has brought the freedom versus security debate to the fore. As usual, with any burning issue of these times, people are being polarized into taking an either or stance. We are going to discuss the same today. We have Omer Ghazi and Arko Bose today with us. We all will be touching upon various aspects of the same issues and so that everybody can, all the viewers can make an informed opinion themselves about which side they should swing. Hi, Omer, and welcome, Arko.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. We welcome you to the second episode of Choosing the Red Pill with Rajesh and Omer, and I welcome Arko Bose on this talk show today to discuss the freedom and the security and the data. So these issues are very pertinent, as Rajesh said. In this episode, we will put multiple perspectives in front of you and hopefully arrive at some conclusions. And so let's see how it goes. We welcome Arko today.
Pleased to be here. Thanks for inviting me, guys.
Okay, so let me begin with asking a question to both of you. There are some people who say they have nothing to hide. They haven't done any crime, so why should they hide? They have no problem sharing with the companies or anybody where they ate or which holiday they went to or the movies they watched. So why sharing of a private data is such an important thing, and why should anybody be wary about who you share it with? Omer.
Okay, so I think that is a very important question in today's time. It is very sensitive. So when I talk about my data being shared or my data being accessed by any, so I, as an individual, reserve the right to protect my data from being accessed by anybody because the more any person knows about me, the more he has power over me. That is what I believe. So,
Okay.
and the more vulnerable I become in front of
Right.
any. So, in order to save my agency, to protect my agency and my privacy, even if I have done nothing wrong, even if I have committed no crime, I still reserve my right to protect my data from any third person. And so I think that is what my opinion is.
Right. Arko, what do you say about this?
Like Omer said, the data that we share with anyone, basically, not just government, but with anyone, offers them leverage over us. Now,
Right.
with someone you trust, that kind of leverage is a matter of, it's a default presumption that obviously, if I'm sharing my data with my family, with my friends, they have leverage over me and I have leverage over them. So that's a very consensual leverage, basically. It also protects us in many ways. It
Right. For
becomes
example,
problematic,
your wife might be knowing your Facebook or Gmail password.
obviously. Now, well, if she's listening, the answer is no. But what I mean is, in principle, that leverage is consensual.
Right.
Where it gets complicated with the government is that because of the legislative powers that a government exerts over its subjects, which is us, citizens,
Hmm.
a government can, by using its majority in the parliament, simply legislate a law that sidesteps the requirement to seek consent of its subjects before using its data.
But
And
that's
that is,
for but that would be if we had an authoritarian government, not a democracy, right? Because we have checks and balances for it.
we would like to. And that's the ideal scenario, which we should push for. The reason I believe today's discussion is all the more relevant is because the government recently came out with this idea that pretty soon is going to push for every citizen to mandatorily use and register their mobile phones on the Arogya Setu app. Now, for me, for someone as private as I am, even that is not problematic. I do not mind sharing my data with the government if it restricts using that data strictly to basically perform contact tracing in the event that I test positive for coronavirus. The
See,
reason I have
but the
my
last Arko, but last I heard, it wasn't mandatory. I mean, there are people
it
who are
isn't so
more.
far. It
No,
isn't
what I'm
so
saying
far.
is, I heard that they had made it mandatory for the contaminated zones, yes, but not for everybody else in green zones, etc. Also.
That's true, and you're right. And that's not what is causing my concerns. What is causing my concern is a proposal in the pipeline, which basically says that the government will soon make it mandatory for all new smartphones to
Uh,
mandatorily force their
Yeah,
users
that would be
register their
yes.
phone on that app. So basically, it's like this: you buy a phone. If you do not consent to using Arogya Setu app, you don't get to use your phone at all. So it's either the government's way or the highway. Not just that,
right.
the government is saying that if at any point of time you disable the app by any means, that will also be a punishable crime. So imagine someone who has maintained social distancing, who is self-isolated, who is maintaining every precaution in the book against contracting the disease. Should they be presumed to be guilty? That goes against the very first principle of jurisprudence that one has to be presumed innocent.
Right. So, Arko, if any individual doesn't want the state to protect them, and so should they have the freedom to not share the data with the state? That's what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, in any progressive democracy, I think that goes without saying that if you own something, and that includes data, then you have the agency to decide, sovereign agency to decide with whom you share that property, with whom you share that data. So if I want a private security agency to provide me with security, then I share my data with them. And obviously, security and freedom are at the opposing ends of the spectrum. The more
Right.
security I want, the more data I need to share about myself with the party who is providing me with that security. The question is, should the government be the de facto agency entrusted with securing its citizens even against their will? Or should every citizen have the right to choose who gets to secure their future, their present, their families?
See, me
And that's
personally
where it becomes
speaking,
tricky.
Arko, me personally speaking, I don't mind sharing that data with government as long as I know what is it being used for and if there are legislations to stop it from being misused. Also, I need to know that what they are going to do with that data and how they are storing that data. Those kind of things are more important for me to. I mean, at the end of the day, what matters is whether you have trust in your government or not to do this or not, or any agency, or it could be a private security firm, it could be social media, it could be government. So whether those trust building measures are in place or not, and trust is not just by words, it's done by actions rather. So those actions are basically the democratic checks and
There
balances
have
that
to
we
be
need.
checks and balances. Trust cannot be
Yeah,
just by words. There have to be checks and balances.
To add to
correct.
that, not just that, Rajesh, there are two assumptions in what you said. Remember, you are making the choice. You're making the willful choice of sharing the data with the government. You're making the willful choice of trusting the government. That's the basic pivotal point that you get to choose with whom you share your data. Imagine a case if you were a kind of skeptical person as I am, and you chose not to trust the government. Would it
Mhm.
then be right for the government to impose upon you to share your data with them? That's
Well,
what
of course,
we would like
you're
to.
absolutely right. But I'm kind of in two minds here, depending on if I'm in green zone or I'm in red zone. For example, if I was in red zone and completely contaminated zone, yes, I would like my protection more and give away more freedom in that aspect, in that equally inversely proportional rate. I would give away my freedom and would want more protection. So yes, if I was in contaminated zone, I would choose security over freedom that point of time, and I would go by whatever my government says.
Which is fine, but would you not like to know that the government is strictly using that data to perform exactly the activity which it says it wants to use your data for? So, for example,
Yeah,
if
of
if
course.
you know that the app is going to use your data strictly for contact tracing, then you'll be fine. But let's say the government
Right.
overextends that authority and uses your data without need meaning that it doesn't use it for contact tracing strictly, but actually
Right.
uses it in a very overarching fashion. It uses that data to spy on you, to keep tabs on your activities, your political views, uh, you know, uh, to basically create a zone of Orwellian state around you. Would you still
Right.
be would you still be comfortable with that? I believe the answer is no. That yes, we would like uh, some level of security to be offered by the government, and I think most people will be fine with that, including myself. It becomes murky when we don't know what the parameters of that contract is, what
We
those
have to
terms and
find that
conditions
sweet
are.
spot, that balance between the security and the freedom. So we have to find that spot, I guess.
Yeah,
Correct.
and especially with this app, because remember the the proposal of the government to make the use of this app mandatory does not come with any legislation, which means that in this case at least, the government is not even thinking of introducing a bill which will have to undergo scrutiny in the parliament to become an act, and then the app is made mandatory for every citizen. No, the government is saying that it is in no mood to bring a legislation. It is simply going to ask every manufacturer of every phone to make it mandatory to register register
Okay.
their IDs with that app.
Okay. So keeping government aside for a moment, and we'll come back
Mhm.
to it.
Yeah.
Omar, what do you think about social media platforms? Private companies using your data for their commercial benefit, or to state that they are using it data for to improve their machine learning, or even if they sell the data to third parties. What do you think about that?
Right. So I think that when we talk about government, and when we talk about someone misusing my data against my will, so I will be
Hmm.
very protective of that. I will be very, and I will be agreeing with Arko on that. But social media is something completely different. It's a different domain because when I am willingly and intentionally sharing my likes and dislikes and my political opinion, my beliefs, my religious beliefs on the social media, and when that data is being utilized by any third party, whether it's a political party or whether it's some corporate to sell me something, then I, as an individual, cannot complain because when I am putting my beliefs in the public domain, they are not my intellectual property anymore, right? And when I'm using those platforms, social media platforms, without spending, I have to understand that nothing good in this world comes from it, right?
Right.
So
But
when I'm not spending anything, so essentially I am the product that is being sold. My likes and
right,
dislikes,
right,
my beliefs, my opinion, so they are being sold. So I cannot complain. Yes, if my personal information, like my phone number, my address, that are being circulated, that are being shared with third party without my information, with malicious intent, that is something that I would be very off and I would be protesting against.
right.
Not to
But
mention, Omer, at any point of time, if you have reasons to believe that uh, you no longer agree to those terms and conditions under which you're using the social media accounts, you have the full freedom to terminate your usage, to terminate your account, to stop using that service. The question is
Absolutely.
that with the government, do you have that consent? I often say this in retort to anyone who tells me that Muslim women wear a hijab as a choice, and I ask, it's only a choice if they can also choose not to wear it without facing consequences. So it's only a freedom. If you can also exercise the freedom to not do it without facing consequences. So yes, I have
Absolutely.
the
That's
full
what I'm saying.
freedom to
Social media, I can terminate, I can disable my account. It is not
exactly,
mandatory. With government
exactly.
agencies, if it's being mandatory that I have to share, that is problematic. Absolutely.
okay. So Arko, can state make it mandatory for one to share their data? Under what conditions do you think it can do so? And what are the democratic checks against such authoritarianism by the government?
Okay, so basically it boils down to, for me, to a similar scenario as in when we ask, should the state have any kind of power over a known criminal who can be considered a danger to society, to others?
Mhm.
The answer is obviously yes, to a certain extent. Under the, judicial oversight, yes, the state can extend such authority over an individual once that individual is known to be a danger to society. So let's say I test positive as for COVID-19, then obviously it becomes imperative that anyone should be aware that I am COVID-19 positive. And
Right.
that's where my consent comes in, that I now do believe that whether or not I consent, the government should be able to make everyone else aware that, look, Arko Bose is COVID positive, so maintain social distance from
What
him.
do you what are the alternate things that one can do? And how can a government make everybody else aware when the technology is already there? The easiest and the cheapest way to make everybody aware.
No, that's what I'm saying. That as far as this scenario is concerned, I believe the state is in the right in collecting that data and
Right.
disseminating that information to the public. That okay, this person is COVID-19 positive, so you are advised to maintain social distance with him. And like I said before, and I'm just repeating here myself, that I consent to the government using my data strictly for this purpose. What I believe must happen is the government should clarify that it will not be using this data for any other purpose
Right. So
unless,
basically agreement is there as long as checks are there that it will
yeah,
not be
so it's a
misused.
strictly provisional agreement. And that
Okay.
is the best
Yeah.
practice. That is how any data should be handled on a need to know basis, that you need to know my data for this purpose. You know my data. The moment your need expires, the data expires, the access expires.
Right. Okay, Omer, there is something called Personal Data Protection Bill, which was introduced by Ravi Shankar Prasad in 2019. Do you, and which is supposed to be protecting personal data of people from, from misuse by government or from misuse by private entities. Do you think it has the still has the potential to be misused or to turn India into an Orwellian state?
Well, when we talk about personal data protection bill, first I think we have to understand what it is. Personal data protection bill is a bill that governs how the data of the citizens will be processed, utilized, and who can access my data, who cannot access my data. So that is what it governs. That is what is personal data protection bill. Now it was drafted by Justice Shri Krishna in 2018, and it was introduced in the Parliament in 2019. Right, but the catch is that the actual drafted bill in 2018 is very much different from the one introduced in the Parliament in 2019.
Right.
Justice Sri Krishna, who was one of the people who drafted it, he has said that the judicial oversight and the checks and balances on the government, which were there in the 2018 bill, have been removed before introducing it in the Parliament. And he has himself used the word that if tabled in this present form, it has the potential to turn India into an Orwellian state because it protects my data from the corporate, from third party, from agencies, but it gives unchecked power to the government to access my data.
To the
Yeah,
government.
to the government.
Right.
So those particular uh, clauses were removed, which were keeping the government in check. So this is
Right.
problematic. Now, I'm not saying that it will turn India into an
So,
Orwellian state,
see,
but I'm saying that it is a significant step in that direction.
so you're saying basically that that bill does protect people, its citizens, from the data being misused by private corporations or exporting the data to anybody else, outside the country. But it does not protect citizens from data being misused by the government or governmental agencies, or even if government decides to hire a third party to use the data.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, that's a very scary thought. And
Yes.
so
In the
but
favor of the bill, in the favor of the bill, we have something like the financial data, the financial details of the citizen cannot be utilized outside of the country. They will be utilized,
Mhm.
they will be stored inside the country. So that is a good
Right.
thing. And the corporates cannot access the data of the citizens, the private, the critical data which includes something very personal. This will be protected from the corporates. The government has no judicial oversight after this bill is implemented. So I think we have to, as responsible citizens, we have to maintain and we have to ensure that there are checks and balances on the government agency.
Okay, I have a question to both of you. Let's, in context of Arogya Setu app, and we understand that this is a time that where security matters more than the freedom. And as Arko also said earlier, we are willing to give away those freedoms, as long as we understand that there are enough checks that the data will not be misused. Do you think that privacy of citizens has been compromised only to ensure security during this pandemic, and that this is a temporary measure, and it will be reversed once the pandemic is over? Or do you think it is going to extend well beyond the pandemic? Omer.
Okay, so I think when we talk about this particular pandemic, this is a state of emergency. And in the state of emergency, we are happily surrendering our freedom to ensure the security, to
Right.
ensure our health, right? And that makes sense because to ensure the safety of million people, of a billion people, some drastic measures are required, which can be taken by only by the state. So that makes, but once this pandemic is, once that state of emergency is goes away, then it depends on the citizens, on the social activists, on every responsible individual to snatch back that freedom from the state. Because
Right.
some people say that, you know, to ensure health, it is important for the state to have an iron hand all the time. But that does not make sense because Yuval Noah Harari has given a very good example in his article that today we do not wash hands because of the fear of the government or we will be jailed. We wash our hands with soap because we understand, we are educated that it kills viruses and bacteria. So ensuring the health of the people
Mhm.
is can be ensured through education and literacy, not by threatening by the government and the iron hand. So we have to educate people and so that they can ensure their health by their own voluntarily. But right now, since people are uneducated, the masses do not understand what a virus is, what is social distancing, why is it important. So right now, I think our freedom is being surrendered, but we will have to ensure that we take it back once this state of emergency is over.
What do you think, Arko, about this? Is
A
this
couple of things.
temporary?
There's a very useful adage that I subscribe to, and it goes something like this: that there is nothing so permanent as a temporary government provision.
Right.
What we usually see is that laws, legislations show a remarkable amount of inertia, even when their tenure, their usefulness has, basically expired, we usually find that they are still in effect. Take, for example, a very relevant act that we had in India. It was passed way back in 1896 under the name of the Infectious Diseases Act.
Mm-hmm.
And no one had heard of it until 2020, late January, when I learned that this was the act the government was using against private labs, private hospitals, and private parties for contributing to the COVID-19 cause. So basically, the government was using this 1896 act to prohibit private hospitals from admitting COVID-19 patients, private labs from manufacturing PPEs and masks, so on and so forth. Only when there was substantial pressure exerted on the government did it say, okay, we're now going to get rid of this act and allow private parties to contribute to the cause. So imagine 1896, an act is passed, it stays in effect till 2020 beyond its practical usage and is only removed under a crisis situation. That shouldn't happen. And there are numerous other examples in which we see similar legislative inertia working against common interest. Not only that, I need to qualify my earlier answer that I'm willing to give away certain parts of my freedom provisionally to the government. We know that there are better technologies available which perform contact tracing without giving away unnecessary amount of your private data. And I'll explain what I mean here. Imagine that someone you came in contact with is tested COVID-19 positive. The moment you learn that, you will immediately voluntarily go to get tested because you know what the implications are of having come in contact with that person. You don't need the government to play a role here, just like Omer explained with the other example.
But then you might not know whether you have come in contact with the COVID-19 positive
that's
person
where
or not.
that's where I was getting at. So Google and Apple have already developed alternative technologies which do not use GPS but use the Bluetooth frequency of your phone. So the advantage is the information gets recorded in your phone with whom you've come in contact with and in other people's phone that they've come in contact with you. But that data is not broadcast to the government. So the moment someone you came in contact with tests positive, you get to know that. You go and get tested.
Also, I've also heard that, what Google and Apple have done it together. I mean, they are developing certain apps which can only supply the data to the health departments and not to the governments. So which keeps a check in the place, in the sense that government cannot use it for their own purposes or any
Well,
other
the health
departments of the
department is
government.
under the government. I mean, it's a government wing. So how much trust you want to attach to that, delineation between government and the health department is up to you. I'm not that optimistic that the government will not exert its authority and conflict of interest to actually extract that data.
But what if it's not a binary situation? What if it's not like whether pandemic is over or not? What if something like, okay, the current pandemic is over, but we need to keep these apps or stuff like that, monitoring apps for the next pandemic that might be coming, or the second wave of coronavirus that might be coming back. So what if the government makes it ubiquitous kind of a thing, not enforced kind of a thing, where you feel that for your own benefit,
And
you
they will
have to use this?
try to do that. I can tell
Yeah,
you.
of course they will. I mean, because that is the best option available for a democratic government without, giving away the feeling that they are being authoritarian.
Yeah, but
Yes.
my assertion is that this government control to protect people is unnecessary. We boil milk to pasteurize it, not because the government tells us to. We protect our accounts with passwords and other measures, not because the government tells us to. We wash our hands with soap, not because the government has coerced us into it. we take these measures because we know that is good for us, that is in our interest. And that is my assertion that to protect yourselves, you don't always need the government to exercise control over you.
Hmm.
There are technologies available, and we have continuously shown a collective ability to upgrade our technologies, keeping in pace with ever increasing threats, ever new pandemics, as to what
But you know
measures we
what?
need to take to
I
protect
s-
ourselves.
I still I am in two minds in certain areas. For example, we have seen during this pandemic many people and across the spectrum from poor people to rich people to Tablighi Jamaat and other. Many people have tried to run away from hospitals. Many people have tried to hide that they have come into contact with any COVID-19
I
patient,
think I would
or they themselves are positive or
I would
not.
say that is
Shouldn't
because
shouldn't
of the lack of awareness. I would
Right,
say
I
that is
know.
lack of awareness.
Correct. That is lack of awareness, yes, but we don't have the time. I mean, for example, in this temporary uh, situation that we are in, we have to use drastic measures, and we don't have the time to educate or aware everybody. I mean, that's a time thing, time-bound thing. So, shouldn't it be mandatory for them to download that app and let everybody know that there is a person in so much meters or so much kilometer of you who is COVID positive or who is ill or something like that?
Yeah, and that's why I said I'm not against using a contact tracing app. I'm just advocating that there is a better technology available that does not simply surrender your data to the government, but keeps everyone around you safe by letting them know that you're positive.
So
When
basically,
I
data that is anonymous, you mean to say?
not just anonymous. So the good thing
Anonymous.
about using Bluetooth instead of GPS is that the data is not broadcast, uh, to faraway locations and stored in a server which is controlled by the government. The moment your phone detects that there is a Bluetooth source in your immediate neighborhood, which is basically owned by someone who tested COVID positive, it will let you know that this is a person with whom you need to maintain distance, and that
But
is
the
your
but
protection.
then
Yeah,
the distance
I would
distance of range of
no, this is a
Bluetooth is
very
very
good
small,
question.
right?
it's adequate.
No, I would
I
sum it
mean,
up. I would sum that
mhm,
Yeah, Omar,
it's
I
please go
more
am
than
ahead.
six
I am in
feet.
the favor of surrendering my freedom. Yeah, I'm saying that I'm in the favor of surrendering my freedom temporarily if it has the option and the enough checks and balance to restore that freedom after this emergency is over. So
That too.
I
That too.
can, yeah, I can download that app. I can voluntarily help the government in containing this pandemic, and then I will uninstall it.
Uh, for example, a very effective way to do this would be that, okay, everyone temporarily installs the app, the government keeps an eye on us, but the moment a test result shows that we have developed immunity, either by vaccination or because we tested positive and now our body has sufficient number of antibodies to offer us that immunity, we immediately get to disable the app because
Right.
no one else can get infected from it.
Okay, there's some amusing thought that I have right now, and I would like to ask both of you. Shouldn't there be an app? I mean, the basic thing that we all agree upon is that there has to be a consent of a person, and there have to be checks on the government that they should not misuse, the data that we give them voluntarily, even in a pandemic or otherwise. So, shouldn't there be an app or technology by which we can keep checks on the government, like they keep check on us?
Okay,
What
we
what
are
are
dealing
what
with,
are what are what are they doing with our data?
yeah,
Why
so I believe
why
we
is
do.
there no app like that?
No, I believe we have an app like that. It's called RTI. So I just
RTI.
2 days
I was
ago,
about to say that we have RTI. Yeah.
yeah, 2 days ago, I filed an RTI with the PMO directly asking if the Prime Minister of India is using Arogya Setu app. I know what the answer is going to be, but I want to force the PMO to give me that answer in writing.
Well,
And
and
it takes a little
let me
while.
tell you let me tell you the answer. in beforehand. In the interest of national security, this answer cannot be fucking given.
That's why I said I already know what the answer is, but I want them to go on record with that answer. I don't want them to be able to evade an answer. So my application was not posing them a question to whose answer I didn't know. My application was basically to let them know that they cannot evade answering my question. That there are
Right.
people who are going to ask this question, and there's no way you can simply say that an answer is not going to be given in the interest of larger national security.
Okay, so thank you
Right,
both
right.
of you. We had a lovely conversation, and I think we all agree that the consent matters, that temporarily giving away of our freedom is fine as long as we know that the data is not going to be misused. And even other than the pandemic, data used by government should not be misused, and we need to be able to have checks on that. There have to be enough legal oversight, judicial oversight, and otherwise as well through the ways of RTI and other ways. So thank you both of you.
Right.
Thank you Arko for joining
Thanks,
us for the
Thank,
Rajesh.
first time
thank
on
you.
choosing the red pill.
Thank you everyone
Thank
for
you, Omer.
watching. I again thank Arko Bose for joining here and sharing his insight with us on this topic. And it was very insightful for me at least. And I hope that we will be back next weekend with another episode. So yes, thank you everyone.
Thanks for inviting me. Bye, everyone. Take care. Stay
Thank you.
safe.
Thank you Arko. Bye bye. Bye everyone.